I got the chance to interview Gavin Hammon, the voice actor from Kenny for the Walking Dead games. I asked him loads of questions, some of which you guys submitted, some of which was submitted by my Twitch chat. I hope you guys do enjoy this. Make sure you stick around to hear about the ins and outs of working on The Walking Dead. I hope you guys do enjoy it. Hello, everyone. Thanks everyone who's tuning into the stream. Thanks everyone who's tuning into the video. I'm joined today by Gavin Hammon. A lot of you guys will know him as voice actors from loads of games such as TellTale The Walking Dead, The Wolf Among Us, all sorts of games. And I have a fair few questions, obviously, for you today. But feel free to introduce yourself first.
All right. Hey. Hello. Yep. I'm Gavin. I look like this. So I sound like this normally. Yeah, I'm a voice actor and I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, I'm very grateful for you coming on. You have coffee. Yeah, it's like midday for you, right? It's like 8 p.m. for me.
We're at the mercy of our internet providers, which is so sad.
Is a little bit. So yeah, as obviously a lot of people who have been kind of watching my videos and keeping an eye on the YouTube side of things will know, Kenny has always been kind of my personal favorite character. I think for me, it was always that kind of sense of something different within that universe, something that didn't really kind of exist. You had a redneck who was trying to balance keeping his family alive while also trying to protect everyone else around it. And I'd say that's kind of why a lot of the fan base obviously loved that character and loved the character you portrayed.
Well, I think one of the things too about Kenny that was cool, at least from my perspective, was that he wasn't just kind of a cliche, sort of redneck. He was a little bit more than that. There was more to him. He had more motivation, which was more fun to play than just your kind of standard, stereotype. There weren't a lot of stereotypes for any of the characters in that game. So we were fortunate to get to flesh them out somewhat. And we had a ton of leeway in terms of what we could ad lib and, what we could do to make things more personal or more intimate, which was really cool. And I embraced a lot.
It's quite interesting you say that about ad-libbing. So how much of the actual kind of storyline were you able to just kind of come up with on the spot and just kind of go with the flow with?
Well, stuff you never really ad-lib too much, because then you start taking things out of the writer's hands and they don't like that. But I mean, in terms of making things more personal, reducing names, or adding, affectations to, grunts and groans and things that just kind of give it more personality, stuff like that. Things that aren't necessarily scripted, but things you can get away with. And I got away with a lot of sort of words that I got to stick in there. Shitbird was one that I injected into the game. I am a big, I guess, James Elroy fan, and it's a term he uses all the time in his books. And so I think I just sort of worked it in there. I was reading something at the time. I don't remember what it was. Yeah, so just little things like that. And I think that's funny is I was listening to some of Luke, who's portrayed by Scott Porter. I was listening to some of his lines when we were working on season 2, and some of his takes were like completely different, where he would give them like almost completely different wording of things, which I was like, okay, that's cool. I mean, I would never quite go that far because I don't want to take it too far out of the writer's hands, but some people do. It's always interesting to hear what other actors do because we never get to hear what anybody else does until it's in the product, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's one thing I did want to ask you, actually. So when you were recording the lines, was it just you in the studio? Like you didn't have anything else to bounce off of? You just had to kind of learn to react to it?
The only time I ever worked in the studio with anybody was with Melissa in season 3 when something happens to Kenny. And so in that particular scene, we recorded that together, which was really cool because we were in Fantasy Studios, which is Fantasy is a record label or like a family of record labels. And they had this iconic studio in Berkeley, California, where my band had actually recorded 3 records. So I remember going in there the first time, they still had our poster up on the wall, which I thought was pretty cool.
Oh, really?
But we recorded there together. Yeah, it was kind of random, but we recorded there together, which was pretty cool. But aside from that, I'm always in isolation. We're always working solo. There's never anybody else there. Sometimes they'll have the lines that they can play in for you, but that generally requires the engineer, who in this case was Jory Prum, may he rest in peace, was always on the ball with that kind of thing. But it just takes time.
Hmm.
It's almost easier just to have the director, who was Julian Kwasniewski, one of the greatest human beings alive. And he would always just kind of read things in. And then I could just play off that, which was good enough. But yeah, pretty much always solo.
I do have a couple of questions that I've come up with a couple, and obviously I've had some sent in. So I guess I'll just start with the first question. So obviously Kenny, for a lot of the fan base, obviously myself included, is one of the best characters within the 4 seasons within the franchise. He develops a lot after obviously the death of Duck and Cartier in the first episode. What would you say the main reason kind of Kenny had? How would you say, sorry, the main reason Kenny had changed by the time we see him in the second season?
So I think that he goes through so much, especially in the middle of the first season. The beginning, it's kind of like he's a setup sort of guy, where he's, you know, the family man, you know, probably racist, but, you know, trying to protect his family and interact with Lee. And then once the bad stuff happens in the 3rd episode and he's drinking, it's like, it's all down. So I think that by the time we get to the 2nd season, there was definitely a grizzled vibe, especially just in terms of the way that the 2nd season could have played out, or they had originally pitched how it was going to play out, is that he was going to be the villain. He was going to basically be like the Carver character, which I think a lot of people reacted pretty negatively to when they were kind of pitching the idea. And I think a lot of people just didn't want to see that happen with him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
when I was making my iceberg video, the amount of people that said there is no credibility to the fact that Kenny was going to be a villain in season 2, and it was actually one of the questions I had, was that a true storyline? And yeah, you've just basically confirmed
Kirsten
it.
Kennedy, who was Kirsten Kennedy, who was one of the leads producers on the game. She showed me the pictures and told me this, and this was the way that it was pitched to me in between seasons. I still thought, you know, because it wasn't clear whether or not he survives at the end of the first season. So it was pitched to me when I went in to kind of look at things and do some storyboarding and some table reads for him, that that was going to be part of the focus. And then, I mean, everything that they do, they create or created, because there is no real, functioning Telltale studio at the moment. But the way that they would work on all of these things was they would basically come up with the first storyline for the first episode and then tweak throughout the whole thing. So rather than write one story that was going to be an arc throughout all 5 episodes and then record all 5 episodes and then release all 5 episodes, it's usually like we do one, we tool it, we tweak it, we release it. Then we start the next one, tool it, tweak it, release it. And that process would go on for a long time, which is one of the reasons why it would take a long time for episodes to come out. So that was just, yet another thing that was added or changed or tweaked throughout. I mean, there's a million of them.
Yeah, so one thing actually as well that I was, because when obviously my iceberg video, which I sent over to you, a lot of the stuff I was trying to figure out was kind of stuff that I wouldn't have ever thought would happen. So, for example, like you said, when they create the first episode and then they kind of tweak it as it goes, wasn't Luke originally intended to be the main villain of season, or the main kind of rivalry to Kenny in season 2 after the Kenny Carver?
Yeah, there was definitely going to be a rivalry between the two. And I think there was, in terms of the way it played out, but I'm not sure what the logic was to kind of have Luke just sort of randomly die. I don't know where the motivation was to do that. And it was a really difficult time for me personally, just because I was working on a toy that— I don't understand. I was working on. Okay, thank you, Siri. So I was working on a toy at the time, in like literally the opposite end of the San Francisco Bay Area where I live. So I was commuting to that, had to be there at 9. I was like there 9 to 1. And then on days where I'd have to record for The Walking Dead, I'd have to drive, and it would spike 2.5 hours to get to this studio in the morning, and then maybe 2 hours in the afternoon to get all the way up to Fairfax where Studio Jory was. And then I would be there for, maybe 2 or 3 more hours. So it's like I was basically leaving the house at 6 a.m. and getting home at 9 p.m. And then I was recording whatever auditions or stuff that I had to do So it was long and tough days. I don't know what the logic was, but I know there was tons of behind the scenes, just kind of random nonsense, because there always was.
Yeah, just
So
always trying to figure
I
out
don't
where
know.
the
I
story's
mean, in
going.
terms of, they were definitely developing. Yeah, I mean, in terms of where the way it was developing, they definitely wanted, I think they definitely wanted that rivalry. But I don't know that there was ever intended to be like a real confrontation between Kenny and Luke. I mean, maybe there was. They were certainly steering it that way, but then it didn't come to fruition, and I don't know why. Maybe they told me, and I just have forgotten since. Another weird sort of thing that falls through the cracks with them.
So, obviously, you worked on technically 3 of the games within the franchise, if I'm correct. What would you say was your favorite installment
Yeah.
of the game to work on, and why?
I really enjoyed a lot of the story beats in the second season. I really, really, really love the way that you can end the second season with Kenny dropping Clementine off. That felt so perfectly written to me. All I had to do was just kind of say the words and feel them. So I like that. I liked a lot of those moments, and that was a very time because of the success of the first one. The second one was kind of much more prominent in terms of people paying attention to it. So there's more notoriety for it. I don't know. It's hard to say. I like getting to do what I do. I like working. So it's really kind of, it doesn't matter a whole lot to me what aspect of or what season it was in particular. I think I prefer story beats in the second one, even though there's a lot more of them, than kind of the way the first one plays out.
Yeah. So the next question is, what would you say was for you the hardest part of trying to bring this character of Kenny to life, given how different he was to the rest of the characters?
I think just getting the words off the page sometimes could be difficult, because there were, for any given scenario, there was Kenny is pleased with you or Kenny is displeased with you, depending on how you have handled, the previous situation. So for me, it was difficult to compartmentalize that stuff, but that's something that's a personal strength of mine. So it wasn't like a challenge to sort of remember, oh yeah, he could be mad, so I've got to say this in kind of a mad way, or in kind of a not so mad way. I think just sort of keeping things, compartmentalized and on track was, especially with some of the things that were getting tweaked, and we were doing 2 or 3 sessions in a week because people were just like, changing things on the fly, or somebody had an idea and wanted to try something. So the logistics of it, getting there, and then being able to keep everything straight was probably the biggest challenge. And then it's it's pretty straightforward once you have the character.
So I imagine you kind of touched on it a bit there. When you were recording your lines throughout, obviously, the 3 games, were you having to record them like multiple times just to kind of convey the tone of if Kenny was annoyed at you or if Kenny was kind of content with you? Was there something you were kind of regularly having to do?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, anytime there was an interaction with, there would always be how other situations had been handled. That was much more pronounced in things where, there were sort of summary scenes, where it'd be like, yeah, well, you were looking out for ducks, so everything's cool, or something like that, where there's always some kind of an angle to it, where you would definitely feel like I need to cover off all of these different options. Not every scene was like that, though. Sometimes it was just angry Kenny or sad Kenny or something like that. But yeah, so you'd have to kind of cover off a lot of emotional ranges. And he went through a bunch, a bunch of emotional sort of stuff. There's a lot of crying and a lot of screaming and a lot of swearing. So just having that range was, was always, it was always a bit of a challenge, but,
Having that kind of flexibility to be able to change the way your character's feeling through the way you speak your lines.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the job, though. That's a pretty good description of what voiceover is, especially character or, animation or interactive voiceover. It's kind of what we're supposed to do. So it was a good sort of, a good test or a good project to get to, display some of those skills, I suppose.
So the next question I have for you is actually one that was sent in by someone from my fan base. It was that Kenny had an off-screen death in the 3rd game. Would you say that the way Kenny was killed was kind of a good ending for the character, or do you think it should have been done a bit differently?
Never into like or question the for me scenario that played out before recorded that not very well fleshed out that I definitely thought was a weaker, like a weaker scenario. I thought this one made sense, I guess. It's like in a car crash, I guess, why not? But as far as I was concerned, it's like he was already on borrowed time because it's like he potentially dies in the first one. He potentially dies in the second one, like, or does die in the second one if you choose, not to let him kill somebody. And so for me, it was kind of like, I knew that he had to have it sort of wrapped up in some way. So I didn't really feel like it was wrapped up poorly. I think that I get a lot of feedback from fans and from people who are fans that they thought it was, poorly handled, but it's not for me to say. I was thrilled to get 4 or 5 sessions, 4 or 5 sessions into the third season to sort of, figure it out, especially for a relatively short scene. So,
because obviously, there may not be much credibility to this, but obviously the first kind of planned death they had for Kenny was him walking out into some kind of lake and drowning himself or something. For me, that always seemed like the weaker ending to Kenny.
That was a weird one. Yeah, so that was one of the originals that they pitched me. He was like singing a song too that someone had written lyrics for, but not a melody. So I had to come up with a melody for it, which is always like a kind of a huge pet peeve of mine, and I think other voice actors, where it's like, yeah, I have the lyrics, so just make a song, which is not something that we're, necessarily supposed to do. It's probably not something that we're getting paid to do. So it was just sort of like, that was kind of like, okay, cool, I'll come up with some ideas. And I've worked on a few projects like that, where they don't necessarily want songs, but they want things to feel sung and feel, musical. So you might be singing on pitch, kind of like a, in a Rex Harrison sort of way or something like that. But get a woman in your life or something. But for me, it was always just, that was weird. And I'm like, okay, cool. This is the way you guys want to go with this. And then someone talked them out of it. And we ended up going with, car crash, saving Clem from zombie.
Yeah, that's what I liked about the way Kenny died in the end, is because
at least it was a sacrifice.
Yeah, everyone, like, you'd expect him to go down fighting, but he didn't, because he couldn't. Instead, he went down sacrificing himself, which is something he does throughout every game. Every game he sacrifices himself at some point.
Let's hope so.
And I think that's why a lot of people obviously really liked the character of Kenny. And it actually kind of ties into the next question I have for you, of like, what was your favorite part of the character of Kenny? What do you think was his best personality trait? What about that character did you like?
Well, I related a lot to, and I mean, it may have just been the time and the place, and like around that time, I read The Road, which is that book by Cormac McCarthy, I think it is. But anyway, it was made into a movie with Viggo. Kind of like a post-apocalyptic father and son movie, super depressing. Don't recommend reading the book if you have a small son, which I did at the time. So I was kind of going into it having been reading that, or having sort of that in my mindset, that I think this dude would do, and I mean, I think I probably would too, do anything that it takes to protect your family in like a really, hellish apocalyptic situation. So I related to that. I liked it. And I liked that it was kind of, there was a nice sort of casual humor to him, and sort of like an off the cuff humanity. And he was introspective too. It's like he very well may have been like a pretty racist guy, but like the way that I got to sort of play with those moments was to make them, not anything he was proud of, which I like, to infuse, I think, enough of self into him, that I could latch on to his positive qualities and just try to shine, make him shine a little bit more. I liked his humanity and his, care for his family. I think those are real things that are important.
Right, yeah, definitely, particularly in an apocalyptic situation. Another question from a Twitch viewer. If you could have voiced any other character besides Kenny in the series throughout all the games, who would you have picked?
Omid. Omid has the best lines. But I mean, they were funny because of Owen, because, Owen Thomas was delivering them. You ruined that guy's face. But, what I mean? Any of those, any of his lines and moments I really, really enjoyed. Plus, he's still alive out there somewhere in theory. So
Who, Omid?
Yeah. He didn't die,
he
did
got shot.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. At the start of the second season, he gets shot in the stomach.
I've played through. Oh, that's right. Right at the beginning. Sorry, Owen. I forgot. Yeah. No, Omid would have been fun just because he had the best lines.
Obviously, you kind of just let in that you haven't played the games massively in detail, but within the games that you're in, what would you say is...
No, not even a little bit.
What would you say is the most kind of influential decision the player has to make in relation to into how Lee will obviously interact with Kenny, or how Clementine interacts with Kenny?
Doing right by Duck, and then doing right by Clem, and then doing right by AJ. So it's always whoever the youngest, or the kid is that's part of the group, for sure. Because then it's like, he always gets it and he'll always let you off the hook, I think. I don't know. Again,
it's a horrible question.
Under Telltale related circumstances.
Definitely. What was the most emotional scene that you obviously recorded?
At least for me personally, was dropping Clementine off, just because I really felt it. The scene obviously where they find Duck in that attic, is awful. The scene where he finds Katya is awful. But I felt, I don't know, there was such like a visceral humanity to, the dropping off, the sort of pleading with, that I really liked a lot. I found it to be very emotional. But I was, kind of at the whole thing, just because it's, it worked, and it's kind of what they needed for the character. Makes the character more likable, I think. So
how did you?
Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. You've answered them all really well. How did you find out that Kenny would be returning in season 2, or was it something you always knew?
So it's something I suspected, because we recorded and it's in there someplace. It's in the ROM, but we recorded Kenny definitely dying. And then like on that roof or in the alley or either one or both, there was definitely, death sounds and whatnot. And then at the rap party, Sean Van came up to me and he was like, I erased all your death audio. And I was like, oh, cool, because that potentially means that I'm still alive. And I remember I was standing with Jory Prum, the engineer, and he's like, oh, I still have. He was always ready just to kind of plug it right back in if needed. But and then about that whole summer kind of off season, I would reach out to Julian Kwasniewski and be like, hey man, what do you think they're gonna do? I mean, are they like developing the second season? Do you think that Kenny's gonna be in it? And he was always like, dude, they'd be stupid not to put him in it. And then I'm like, well, yeah, but who knows what that means? So I had a theory, and then eventually they reached out and told me. And I knew Kirsten Kennedy, who was, again, one of the sort of executive producers on that second season. I knew her brother in high school. We used to go to his mom's house and drink lots of cheap beer. And she would always be upstairs ignoring us because we were idiots. But that was like the hangout spot. So I knew her fairly well. And so I think she reached out and said, yeah, of course you're in it. And here's when, we're going to start working on how it's going to play out. And then they showed me storyboards and stuff of what the character was going to look like and all that sort of thing. So it was about, probably a month or two before production really started that I knew for sure.
The storyboards that they showed you, was that for the original script or the script that we actually see in the game?
It's the same. Well, the storyboards were not, they were more just sort of character designs, or they were locations, stuff like that. So it'd be like, this is where, you might meet, Clem at this sort of chalet. This is what he's going to look like. This is what Sarita looks like. So it was that sort of thing. And he had the full beard instead of the mustache and all of that sort of stuff. He may have had the eye patch at that point and they hadn't figured out how that was going to happen, but I don't remember. It was a long time ago.
I have 2 questions from my Twitch viewers, but I do have another question. Bearded Kenny or Mustache Kenny? Who did you
Hi,
prefer?
Twitch. Oh, Mustache Kenny.
Mustache
To me,
Kenny.
it's the same Kenny, right? But I mean, it's a really good mustache. So, but it's yes.
Mustache Kenny, Christ, that's a bold claim. I always prefer Bearded Kenny. The second he got that eye patch, it's just Bearded Kenny the entire time.
Yeah, it's got more of a pirate vibe, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I remember watching the scene where
you Brits love your pirates. You love your pirates over there, don't you?
We do, to be fair. My entire channel was based off a game called Sea of Thieves, so it just kind of divulged to The Walking Dead after about a year. Oh, but yeah, it's all changed.
He loves that game.
It's such a fun game, and that's where everything started. And I've been an avid fan of The Walking Dead now for, God, since I was about 11, so about 8-9 years. And just like I remember playing the first ever game, sat over like on the end of my bed on my tiny TV, playing TellTale The Walking Dead, the first game, because I bought the entire thing. I must have played that game about 100 times. I played it a lot.
Now I might say 11 is a little young. I'd be like signing something for them and just sort of glaring at the parents like, what the hell are you
Why are you letting your children play this game?
That's fine. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I honestly...
Being a parent myself, it's like, I am, if my kids want to play it now, they're teenagers, totally fine. But yeah, just, kid, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Do you still talk with any of the other The Walking Dead game voice actors? Obviously, I imagine you all went your separate ways, but do you still stay in contact with any of them?
Who plays Omid and Sissy Jones, who plays Katya. I'm still much as we'd like to. Haven't seen that. Yeah, no, I'm still like Melissa Hutchison is one of my best friends. So we're still very much in contact. Omid, Katya, we're all very chummy. We don't see each other as often as we'd like, but I still, I'll chat with Dave sometimes on social media, that sort of thing, maybe events or conventions or something like that. So yeah, we actually probably are more in contact with each other than any other cast I've been a part of. Yeah.
I suppose when you work on a project of the sort of size and scale of the TellTale Walking Dead games, you kind of you almost have to stay in contact with the fans and with the other cast members.
No, you don't. I've worked on others. You don't though. I've worked on other projects that were huge and had tons of records and tons of people in them, and it's like you just may never see anybody else. And it's this was pretty unusual because we, after recording the first season, we all went out. We all like had Thai food in Fairfax, where the studio was, which is really unusual. So there were a lot of Bay Area voice actor projects originally. We were all pretty close and chummy because we kind of knew each other prior. So it was definitely unusual. It's not as common to do that in other projects. Like no other project I've been a part of. Animation maybe, because you're seeing each other and you're recording together at the same time. So that's probably different. But even so, I'm not super close with.
In the event of an actual zombie apocalypse, what character do you think you'd be most like?
I think I would be most like Kenny.
Well, you think you'd have your eye batted out?
Not for my family. I probably would. I would have a gun and sheetrock, and I would be doing whatever it could to keep my.
That's brilliant. That is brilliant.
Did you hear any of that?
I heard a bit of it. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I have. Right, brilliant. Well, that's all the questions I have. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you enjoyed your time. I'm glad the internet held up as much as it did. I could probably get a decent interview out of this. Is there anything you want to mention? Anything you want to plug?
I hope so.
I think before you go, if the internet will hold up, there is one more thing. I'm gonna have to get you to say a Kenny quote. I'm gonna have to get you to say an iconic one.
Yeah.
Which
one?
Oh, there's so many. I can't think of one now. I had loads planned, but I can't think of any. What would you say?
I don't remember. I remember like two of them. So you're gonna be better at pulling them out than me. If people want me to do Kenny's voice for them, I'm on Cameo. You can look.
Really?
So.
Okay, well, you guys heard that. If you guys want a Kenny voice, Kenny voiceover done, then head on over to Cameo. That's a good quote, actually, that I think we could ask you to say. We need to find a goddamn boat.
Sure. We need to find a goddamn boat.
It's brilliant. It's so good. Before I leave, I just wanted to say thank you guys so much. Due to the success of my iceberg video, I was given the chance to interview one of my favorite video game characters of all time. And it's all down to you guys and the support that you guys have shown me. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I really enjoyed making it. As Gavin said, go and check him out on Cameo. I'll try and put a link in the description. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Have a good one.